What's up, Windwalkers, and welcome to my Operation Floodgate Complete Dungeon Guide. Now, it's worth mentioning that this is a dungeon guide made for all players. So, whether you're a Windwalker monk or one of the less cool specs, this is going to be super easy to follow and runs through everything you'll encounter and need to look out for in the dungeon. Starting off with my gear, I'm basically running every new piece of gear I could get my hands on, including some trinkets that honestly are probably not the best for the setup. But hey, it's the PTR, I'm testing just about everything. In terms of talents, you can see I've gone for Conduit of the Celestials, and I'm running the new talent, Slicing Winds. Unfortunately, to run this talent, sacrifices have to be made. Whether it's correct to remove dual threat and transfer of power to run this is up for debate, but like I've mentioned, I'm testing out just about everything. If you want to catch one of my streams where I do endless dungeon runs testing out builds, talents, and just about everything available to me, I stream on YouTube every Saturday and Wednesday at 4 PM, with my next stream tomorrow, Saturday the 18th. Okay, self-plug over. Let's check out this dungeon then. So, Operation Floodgate plus 10. This is basically one of those dungeons where they've used the assets of the world that's already been created. It is an area that you'll be familiar with. So, this is what you're going to do for the initial first pack on this dungeon. You'll either pull these mecha drone snipers on the right here and go for a smaller pull, or you'll do this pull. So this will either be your first or second pull, and this is where you're going to pop all of your cooldowns, because it's a big one. Now, the Shreddinator 3000 is what you need to be careful for. He's going to put blades down on the floor. The initial tick does not hurt, but the follow-up from that is what gets you. If you stand on those blades for more than 1 second, you're going to get executed. On top of that, you can see the amount of damage that can come out in a moment's notice if you're hit with that flamethrower. You will be dead within a second. You'll barely have any time to react to it. So the name of the game here is pretty much constantly moving. Whenever these Shreddinators are up, don't stand still, just keep slightly moving. That way, when a blade comes in or the flamethrower is about to come in, you'll always be able to dodge it. So the name of the game of this first part is basically to blow up these boxes over here. What you want to be doing is going around the map to all of these locations, popping them, and that way you'll be able to enter the final part of the dungeon. So following on from the Shreddinators, we have the VentureCo Architects, and they're stood on top of scaffolding. They are untargetable as long as they're on scaffolding, and they'll constantly shoot out a nail gun that will root everybody. What you want to be trying to do here is grouping up all of the ads underneath the scaffolding, getting it down as fast as possible so you can actually target this ad. Once he starts rooting everybody, things can get bad real quick. As well as that, we have these bots, these loader bots that start winding up and spinning. On their own, they don't do a lot of damage. However, when there's upwards of like 10 of them at a time winding up, they can do a significant amount of damage. So CC is the name of the game here. You can't interrupt them with kicks. It's going to have to be hard CC. But as a melee, you will feel it. Ranged, not so bad. The Mecha Drone Snipers, not too bad. They'll put out these big old swirlies on the ground now, which are a lot more visible than they once were, so that's a good thing. Thank you, Blizzard. However, you are going to want to move out of those, as they will pretty much one-shot you. They also cast an ability called Trick Shot, which needs to be interrupted. This can either be done through kicks or hard CC. Now, one of the toughest ad packs in the entire dungeon is the Dark Fuse Blood Warper, and that's because of the ability Warp Blood. Here, you'll see that I popped a fuse magic instantly, and if you look at the health bars, you can see all the players that haven't popped a defensive ticking down insanely. This is a plus 10. On a plus 12 or above, if you don't have a defensive for this, you are dead. This ability is a killer, and it will take you out so fast you won't even realize it. So, you move up to this platform over here, and we're getting ready for the first boss. We're going to blow up another set of boxes here. That'll be 3 out of 5, so we're well on our way with the mini objective. This ad pack, not too bad, as long as you can see that we're CCing it here, and just nuking it down in AoE. This is one of the easier ad sets, so it's the pre-build up to the boss. Now, the first boss you're going to fight is Big Mama. Big Mama is a big gal, and she's got 4 ad bots that she'll spawn throughout the fight. These ads are your #1 priority. So what's going to happen in this fight is these ads are going to move around, do dashes with swirlies that you need to move out of, But then once they've done a few dashes, they're going to start casting. These casts need to be interrupted. That's why they're your main focus and you want to nuke them down as priority 1. Because if they start getting these casts out, they're going to one-shot your group. So here we can see Sonic Boom. This is another ability Big Mama does. It targets a player and it will always shoot forward at the player's location. So the best thing to do is move backwards a little bit and just dodge sideways when it comes in. Anyone hit will get knocked back and silenced, so you really don't want to put this into your entire group. Otherwise, casters are going to have an absolute nightmare. On top of this, she casts Jumpstart, and that's kind of like her intermission phase. You need to pop a defensive for this. It lasts for a long time, does magic damage, and really hurts. Following this, you'll put down a zone on the floor that's kind of like a glowing blue electricity field. This is where things start to get dangerous. You need to move out of this, but the ads can start jumping into this with their dash ability, and then they can start casting inside of it. So you see what I mean? Things can get out of control really quickly, because if an ad starts casting inside of it and you need to interrupt this ad, players can die trying to stop this. So ranged interrupts are really good for this, but as well as that, you just need to nuke down these ads.
'Fortifying Brew Innate'. Touch of Karma Innate.
So, Big Mama down, and the 4th box is right behind her. 2 ways of doing this. One is to take the smaller pack and then have someone sneakily detonate. The other way, which we did, was to fight the scary pack. Good choice. So once again, Warp Blood. You need to pop a defensive for this. You'll see that I popped Karma this time, and my health isn't doing too badly, but you can see other players are suffering. So, 4 boxes down, so far so good. However, that's probably the easier part of the dungeon. Big Mama is probably one of the harder bosses on a higher keystone level, but once you've got it in your head that targeting ads is #1 priority, it's not that difficult. So you start going into the middle here and moving on to the second boss. You can do big pulls here, but don't go too crazy. If you start grabbing bombers and Venture Code divers, things can go out of control really quickly. That's not to say pull little, just be careful what you pulled. I've seen Demon Hunters on PTR pulling ads of upwards of like 20, and things just go really badly. You do get knocked up here occasionally by these casts. However, if the ad stays alive long enough, they'll grip you back down. That being said, if you nuke the ad before it grips you back down, I can see players dying to full damage here. So you might see in the background another scaffolding, and there's quite a lot of ads here, so you're going to want your big AoE abilities up for these packs coming up. So fight them underneath of the scaffolding to get the architect down so that it doesn't root every single person in your entire party. And then just start popping AoE. This initial pack isn't so big. It's the pack afterwards that I'm holding all of my cooldowns here for. So, once again, you can see that I'm targeting the scaffolding and focusing that down straight away. I want that ad down because I know that my healer is getting nail-gunned out the wazza right now. Surveying Beam by the Venture Coast Surveyors are also really deadly in this dungeon. You can CC them with a kick or an interrupt, paralysis, you know, any sort of CC. But if they keep casting and hitting a target repeatedly with that long lava ray, they are going to feel it. I've seen my health bar absolutely drop because of this. And like all dungeons, some casts are a lot scarier than others, and Surveying Beam is one of those you need to be looking out for. Now this is a really scary pack, probably the scariest pack in the entire dungeon, and that's because there are 2 Shreddinator 3000s, which means double flamethrowers, double saws on the floor. Things get really crazy. The name of the game is movement. You need to be so careful here, especially on a higher level keystone, and if you have a group full of melee, you're going to suffer. You can see how fast these saws come out of the ground, and then they start double flamethrowing. You can get trapped really quickly. These ads need to go down really fast, the priority would be to target focus one, and then just pray that the other one goes as well. But you can see that if you have a group full of melee and they're all stacked up, things can go really wrong. As well as that, you can see Ring of Peace because I saw a Surveyor hitting my healer. You just need to be aware of that. Make sure you don't let your healer get nuked by a Surveyor beam. So, this scary ad pack finally done. Let's take a look at boss number 2. The Demolition Duo. So, the Demolition Duo are an interesting one. If you've ever done Siege of Borealis, the first boss in there has a mechanic that surrounds itself with bombs on the ground. This is pretty much that. The small boss, Geezle, all she really does is jump around once or twice and shoots out these lines like this. She's not too much to be feared about. However, she also places a ton of bombs on the floor. Not 1 or 2, we're talking like 6 or 7. However, there are multiple ways to defuse this. One of these ways is that circle that player just had and to be dispelled on top of a bomb. The other way is the big guy starts charging during this phase, and anytime he charges and hits a bomb, he knocks them up and they disappear. Now, you don't want to get hit by his charge head on, however, you want to make sure all the bombs blow up. The only way to remove this circle is through a dispel, so either wait for your healer or diffuse magic if you're a monk. The other thing to note about these two bosses is they're very similar to the bosses in Stone Vault, in that they need to die at the same time. If one of them dies before the other, they get an 80% enrage bonus. Now, Brunt is obviously going to be the one that's harder to knock down, especially if you have a group full of melee, as he is the one that's constantly dashing. You can see their health pools are completely different here, and we actually nuke down the other boss first. This is not how you want to play this, especially on a higher keystone. Luckily, he was predominantly in his charge phase. You can see that wallop damage coming through, and if he had more health and started walloping a lot more, this group would have perished real quickly. I've done this dungeon at least 20 times, and I've seen that wallop end an entire group before. So, once you've taken down the second boss, you set up some more boxes, and that should have been about all of them. There's one final detonation that needs to go off by the waterworks, so we're going to head over there. Now this can be a really juicy AoE pull, so if you can save your AoE cooldowns for this, do. As well as that, these guys really hurt, so if you group them all up, they need to be nuked down really fast when they start spinning. Either hard CC them or nuke them down before they can nuke you down with their jettison kelp ability. They also have restorative algae, so, you know, don't let them heal back up. Now this boss is really fun, and I mean really fun. His name's Swampface, you know, sounds kind of boring on the surface, but the gimmick of this fight is staying as a group and staying as pairs. Basically, he's going to vine 2 players together. One player won't be vined, but there'll be 2 pairs at least. And if you move too far away from your other partner, you'll pull them towards you, and vice versa. And this gimmick is quite important because there's a lot of avoidable damage that comes in during this fight, so you need to be coordinated here. Either before you pull this boss, decide in a direction that you're always going to move, or be in comms with someone so you can call it out. So either you'll always move left, always move right, but be consistent. If you aren't moving in the exact same direction as your teammate, you're going to end up pulling them through a mechanic. So you can see that frontals come in, waves come in, massive circles on the floor come in and drop debris. This is crazy, especially when you paired it with someone else. Otherwise, it's kind of just a tank and spank. There's nothing more to it. As long as you have coordination, this is probably the easiest boss in the entire instance. It's all about dodging and just staying as a group. I think the hardest thing about this boss is just coordination, especially if you're in a pug. So you can see those 2 players got too far away from each other on a mechanic, and he got one shot and pulled at the same time. So you can see how deadly this fight can be. If you end up pulling someone through like a wave or a frontal, they'll just get one shot. So the damage numbers are quite high on this boss, because it is all avoidable damage at the end of the day. Good news, you've defeated Swampface. All boxes have been detonated, and now you're going into the secret underground lair of the waterworks. But what awaits you is terrifying in the form known as Bubbles. Now, you might think these Dark Fuse soldiers are here to mess you up. No, Bubbles has got your back. He's a team player. He'll take them out for you. However, Bubbles doesn't mess around. Bubbles puts down these bubbles, and they move constantly, and if they hit you, they deal a lot of damage. Now, your tank can soak these, but they are going to hurt. As well as that, Bubbles does backwash, which is constant AoE damage to the group. So you need to either pop a defensive here, or just be topped by your healer. This might look like a real clean Bubbles kill, but I've seen this go out of control real quickly depending on where he's tanked. If you start tanking him on the bridge, like we have done here, things can go crazy real fast, especially if it's at the start and he starts spawning bubbles all around it. It can just go absolutely awful. This is kind of a chill pull. It's electricians, so electricians and contract workers. We haven't looked at electricians yet. They're a new ad that are down here in the waterworks. These ads are terrifying. You need to be super careful with these. They always cast lightning bolt, and if they're not constantly kicked, things can go terribly really fast. Otherwise, this pull isn't too scary. It's about 4 or 5 ads that cast frontals out. If you've done Dawnbreaker, you'll be very familiar with these frontal abilities. It's pretty much whatever the ads in the chapel did. These ads just do the exact same thing. Don't stand in them, and you'll be alright.
I must get closer.
So you might be wondering why I brought up electricians when there was only one in that pull. It cast 1 lightning bolt. Not that scary, right? This is where electricians do get scary. There's a lot of them, and they all constantly cast. You don't kick interrupt them. They will cast until they run out of mana. And surprise, they're never going to run out of mana. The best thing to do with these is to stack them up as soon as possible and hit them with hard CC and kick interrupt. Kick interrupts are prio here, but if you can just hard CC them and nuke them, that works just as well. So, we're coming up to the second to last ad pack, and we've got a new guy here, the Jump Starter. Now, the Jump Starter is an absolute pain in the neck. On top of the electricians constantly casting lightning bolt, you're going to have to dodge these swirlies that do an insane amount of damage if you're hit, and they're constantly coming out until the Jump Starter is taken down. Bad news. What's worse than 1 Jump Starter? Well, that would be 2 Jump Starters, and this could be on par with the scariest pull in the entire dungeon, especially on a higher key. Just look how fast these swirlies come in. If you stand in a single one of these, it can chunk you from 100 to 0 instantly. On top of that, these guys can take quite a while to take down, so you need to really target focus them. You can see just there, I got hit by 1 swirly on a +10, and it did about 80% of my health, maybe even 90. Anything higher, and your group can wipe on these really quickly. However, once they're done, it's time for the final boss, Geezle Gigazap. Now, Gigazap isn't that hard of a boss, to be honest. He has a very similar mechanic to the Demolition Duo, where you start the fight, he turbocharges up, and then you start shooting frontals out. Except these frontals come in like a machine gun, constantly coming in, targeting your previous location, and he just spams them. Guy's got unlimited mana. However, if you survive that, good news. Now the entire waterworks is falling in on itself, and you can see these electric puddles on the floor. These are going to be very important for a mechanic coming up. 2 players will get a swirly during this fight. If you ever get that, just move out the group and pop a defensive. He will only hit anybody inside of that swirly. The main gimmick of this fight is leaping sparks. Every player will be targeted by 1, and you have to basically guide it into these puddles on the ground. However, 1 puddle per spark. You can see that the entire group tried to get their lightning bolt through the same puddle, and 1 player unfortunately was a little slow on the mark, so their lightning bolt goes through it and then continues chasing them down. Basically, if the animation looks like water sporting out of it, it's good. If it looks like electricity sporting out of it, find another puddle, bro. These lightning bolts don't really do any damage to you, but they stun you for about 10 seconds. So whatever comes up next is going to one-shot you. Otherwise, Gigazap is kind of a chill boss. Honestly, in this entire instance, I would say Big Mama is probably the scariest one, as it can get out of control really quickly. And then I'd also say Swampface, with a lack of coordination, can also put you in a really tight spot. Overall, I think this is a really well balanced dungeon. There's a lot going on, scary ad sets, scary bosses. But on the other side of that, I think it'd be really interesting to see what sort of pulls people get into as we start learning this dungeon a little bit more. Anyway, here's my damage breakdown for the entire dungeon. I am currently doing PTR testing, so I am testing out a lot of different talent builds. As I said earlier, if you want to check out my stream, I'll be streaming on Saturday, which is tomorrow, from 4 PM GMT, where I'll be running 4 of the War Within dungeons on the PTR in Mythic Plus, so that'll be really exciting, as well as trying out the brand new Windwalker changes that came in the other day. Other than that, thank you for watching, and good luck with Operation Floodgate when it comes out on live.